Hello, my name is Jochen Schleser from Schleser Sabri Service. I'm excited to be here today and talk to you about the episode 1 of the reflex points. We talk about shoulder and cartilage damage. Today, I'm very excited to have Aoife Simmons, and he will join us because, as you all know, the horse has to be very fit in order to carry a rider, but also the rider has to fit. So, Aoife, thanks very much for being here today, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about you and what makes you so special in this field.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I'm really excited to do this series with you. I'm looking forward to it. As he already mentioned, my name is Aoife Simmons, and I am here to talk about and share my information on rider wellness and how that involves the horses. So in order for us to be our best selves for our horses, we need to do that for us as well. So I'm currently here right now in the UK studying equestrian sports science and advancing my knowledge of 10 plus years in this industry to really talk about how the horse and the rider both impact each other and how we can do our best to do our best every single day. So here we go.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being here today. Of course, we all in the same boat as equestrian riders. We want the best for the horse. And the amplifier, the saddle in between, cannot make the rider fitter or the horses better. The amplifier, the saddle, which we talk about today, will affect the horse and the rider. And again, it's so cool that you're here and share a little bit what happens if I keep calling it the amplifier. The reason why I call the saddle the amplifier, because if something is off, it doesn't fit the rider or the horse, it makes everything so much more difficult for both athletes, right? So let's start with sharing the screen here. And in this screen here, I'm just share with you quick for everybody to look. We have here a horse's skeleton, and on that shoulder blade, which is right this area here, we have on top, I always call it a half broken dinner plate. This round circle here, that's the cartilage. And that cartilage is very floppy, very soft, kind of like your ear. And when somebody's cutting my ear off, it does not regrow. So saddles can sit on that cartilage. This BL13, that's a lung meridian point. So not only can you damage a cartilage, but you can also do something to the horse's respiratory system, which we cover in one of our next episodes. So as we look at the saddle length, for example, if the saddle is too long, it sits on the area in the lumbar, and in motion, it will drive it forward into a muscle group area, which is sensitive, and on top of this cartilage, what we talk today. We have veterinarians around the world who do dissection and show if the saddle doesn't fit in the width. Width means, you see the little D-ring here? So from that D-ring to the other side, that's the tree width. And then tree angle, from that corner here to that can be in any different shape. So we got tree width and angle. If we ignore that, or the saddle is too long, or we ignore how the billets fall, or the saddle stuffs, the saddle will drive against, here's the horse's, let's start on the picture on the right. The horse is dissected, lays on the side, and the veterinarian holds the saddle tree on top. You see the shoulder blade here. So after further dissection, they took the shoulder blade off, and you see the damage here on the cartilage. So it's pretty cool what's all available. The horse shows you most of the time these pain lines through here, or the divot in the neck, and the vicious cycle comes to the part when they divot in the neck, they press down the rib cage, and the lanius goes all the way to the leg. So when we have pain, and this is where your expertise, because it also relates to rider, because what if I look at what we call it, the stiffness, the fatigue in the muscle? What happens? Nutrition, oxygen, blood level doesn't flow through. We got the research here from University of Scotland exactly 10 years ago, when they talk about at a certain pressure, 4.6 kpi, the horse's danger of overriding transverse processes, also known as kissing spine. I mean, it's all there, but what about the pain level? We see the pain scale of the horse. What can the rider do? How can they advance helping them? Now, we as athletes, we do whatever we will do and whatever we can do, and no matter what discipline we ride. No, we ride in so many disciplines, and I'm going to go over this fast forward, but the fact is sometimes the horse is not even, and then trainers come in, but riders are not even either, and this is where Aoife comes in. We are riding extreme sports, anything from trick riding to bareback riding to polo to all different disciplines, dressage, and so on and so forth. In order to get a good, healthy athlete and have these muscle function right, where even veterinarian point at it and says, we can't hyperflex our horses. We cannot put them in this frame. And then the vicious cycle happens. The saddle doesn't fit because you didn't fit it orthopedically. How many riders sits on horses where they have skeletal deformity to horses, only to have then performance issue in any fields? So in our sport, equestrianism, we ride sometimes horses from the racetrack, especially hunter jumpers, horses who have started when the horses only developed at this area. So while the horses is written, all the lower arm, upper arm, shoulder blade, and skeleton is still forming. Now imagine you do this on the saddle or the horse, and it doesn't fit. So the rider does a good thing, and I've seen this so many times, Aoife. They do everything possible for the horse. They get a good saddle fitting, and they care for their horses, and they love their horses, but they don't look at themselves. We have trainers who can recognize the pain scale to the horse, but whoever looks at the pain scale to the rider. And I love your work, and I looking from the saddle fitting from the horse's point of view. And when I discovered you and we kind of talked again, it says, oh my God, we have to share this to the field out there, that riders who are consistently riding crooked and adapting this as normal because the saddle doesn't fit. But then comes the old saying, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is the saddle crooked because the horse is lame? Or because the saddle doesn't fit? Because the rider doesn't fit. So without further ado, I know science has been there that cartilage is permanently damaged if you do not fit the rider, the saddle. But there is not a lot of talk about what riders can do. And I don't see a lot of research from your expertise. And so I'd like to have you now share your side a little bit and say, what can you do as a rider? How does that relate to the rider if you're constantly riding on a saddle that is crooked? And if the saddle fits right and it doesn't hopefully damage your horse's cartilage, then hopefully the saddle doesn't cause new problems because we didn't address the rider. So without further ado, Aoife, the mic is yours.
Thank you. I think an amazing aspect of what you just talked about, which is so much, you showed us anatomical photography of what takes place when a horse has cartilaginous damage, but you also mentioned that there's a lack of scientific research and studies on the rider, and that's exactly why I am in this position right now, to one, talk to you, and two, to be in school and to really learn more about how these two things do influence each other and just the importance of it. So going to these two pictures here and then backpedaling a little bit from that, as we're looking here, we're seeing a couple different freeze frames of riders who are imbalanced over a jump. And obviously our main goal is to be as symmetrical as possible, just as it is to do that with our horses. And so what you mentioned earlier, which is we have trainers, we have coaches, we have teams that make the horse as best a possible athlete as they can. And that's exactly where I come in with the human, because as we know, but we're now studying and proving that through research, the human anatomy and the equine anatomy have to go hand in hand, and you are the glue to that piece. But in order for those two to come together, the horse needs to be as symmetrical as we're going to get it, because obviously there are imbalances in life, just like with humans. But the saddle is correct me if I'm wrong, a symmetrical object that you all are trying to affix to a temporarily affix to a horse, then has a rider who is hopefully not imbalanced. But even if they are, that makes one, your job harder, and two, that makes my job harder. So my goal is to make sure that these pictures become less frequent, but also riders understand what they can do and how they can be a better partner with their horse, because technically That's what we really want to do. We want to be more harmonious. We want to be one with them in the saddle and out of the saddle. So when it comes to show jumping, for example, we want to see that the rider isn't collapsing through one, a shoulder, or two, sitting heavier in one sit bone than the other. Because as we know, when we're driving with our seat and we're using one side more than the other, that's where it goes back to that possibility of the cartilaginous damage. We're using one side of your body and one side of the horse's body, sometimes in tandem, sometimes in opposition, that affects them. And then they want to, how do I say this? They want to do the best that they can to be a the proper vessel to carry us over these different obstacles that we may do. Whether that's raining, for example, in a sliding stop, and someone has an extreme C curve because they're rounding forward, one, because of that inertia, but two, because they're already used to sitting in this rounded posture. So while we need that temporarily in certain moments, we don't need to house that at all times. And when we're driving and sitting deeper into our seat in certain moments, we don't want to influence pain in our horse. We want to influence them through communication, and that should be temporary. Give, stop, go, and then we want to continue along from there. Does that make sense?
Totally, Aoife. And I always like to give example.
Yeah.
So let's say we want to have a nice picnic.
Yep.
And we bring a picnic table, but the floor I put the picnic table on is not even for whatever reason, right? I could take a bulldozer and make the floor even, or I can just accept if I want to have a picnic on this little hill, it might be uneven. So I could have a symmetric table with all four legs the same, but the pot of stew will slide on one side. So no picnic because the food just fell off the table. Or I can adjust the legs to the underground so the table is level. But what good is it, the stew, the heavy pot of stew, being only on one side?
Right.
And this is, I'm not saying riders are stews. I'm just as a metaphor or as a comparison. If the pot of stew, what is always hanging on one side, become, that feels to me now, okay, I'm doing this now. My equilibrium is even. Meanwhile, my body is like effed up, like you wouldn't believe it. You know, my spine is like, my discs are going nuts. My one side muscles creeping up. Now I'm sitting on something what is even, which now feels uneven to me. Now this wonder doctor comes, or this amazing physiotherapist comes along, Aoife, and he says, let me work with you. And now that feels uneven because this felt even, right? So I wondered if you can tell us a little bit about, because from my point of view, I can't do a job right. I can't get the saddle balance right and stay right and make it even. So back to the picnic table. What good does it do if I make the picnic table right if the pot of stew always hangs on that side?
Yeah.
So you're the person who's actually moving the pot through it, right? So what would happen to the body of a rider long term, to their disc, which kind of like not the same as cartilage, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't, tendon, ligaments, if long term damage to the rider. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So number one, I love the analogy because I can totally envision it and see exactly what you're saying. And what you were leading to and saying is temporary fix aren't going to fix the entire issue if you keep doing the same thing over and over. And that leads me to the answer of the question is, how can someone like me help someone who has imbalances, whether that's through injury or just uncertainty because they've been sitting and doing something for an extended amount of time for that duration? Number one, I would say we need to do more within the industry of gait analysis, because this all takes place from the ground and then it continues in the saddle and then it continues over jumps or whatever discipline that you may be doing. So in this case, watching someone walk, for example, would tell me if there's an imbalance in the hip, commonly the ankle, the mid and lower back. And so watching them walk would also say, okay, how do they carry their weight? And then I can see how they get into the saddle, how they get out of the saddle, and then how they ride. So for me, you can't fix someone immediately, but over a specific amount of time, let's say 12 weeks, 12 weeks, 24 weeks, somewhere around that time, we can then make adjustments and say, if this person has an ankle weakness here on the right side and they have a hip weakness on the left, and then they have a spinal rotation in the thoracic area, mid-thoracic area, how can we sort of manage that so that they can become, over time, obviously, more symmetrical and even? And I would say mobility drills as well as strengthening. And I also have a whole process called the 4S's, which are stability, suppleness, strength, and stamina. But taking someone through stabilizing those three areas that I mentioned, and then strengthening them, and then lengthening them, and then adding that sort of stamina from there so that they can continue to do what they love to do, which is ride the horse for longer. That stability is going to help all the way through the stamina. So
Yeah.
strengthening the ankle through stability, then making sure that it has the range of motion necessary to not just keep the heel down, but also maintain the proper position, continues along that continuum of what they need to do and how they can properly do it for longer, right? Because our goal is always to ride forever. And I think we talked about that in one of our last lives,
Of course.
which, watching the Queen and being able to see her do what she did at such a long and extensive career. We want to follow in similar footsteps, but we don't want to do that within pain. And while we have busy and crazy lives, that becomes challenging. So I would say as simple as 5 minutes a day, all the way up to about 30 minutes, easily can help into your journey of making sure that you're the best person that you can be for your horse, so that these pictures look more like the rider on the left here in the blue, putting a little bit more pressure into the left side instead of really sinking into the right. And the same thing for our rider on the right, which may need to extend and hinge through their hips rather than rounding the back over the horse.
Yeah. So you just said something, and people will immediately back off by saying, well, I don't have that kind of a money like the Queen has, so I can't ride that long. And I think this is exactly why you and I are together and say, I beg to differ. Absolutely can ride that long. I always like to say, if you fix the nails in the end of the driveway, then you don't have constantly flat tires. What is the nails in the end of the driveway? Remember, the person who knows the how will always follow the person who knows the why. I come to you because you explained to me just briefly, but I got it. Why do I need to strengthen the weakness in my left ankle, right? Or right ankle? And no matter how good the saddle fits the saddle to the horse, this is what I find when I started going. I immigrated from Germany to North America, 86. And then in 2003, I started selling saddles back to Germany. That's like selling snow to the Eskimos, because all the saddles come from Germany, or from England. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And the reason why we did it, because I worked together with the German National Riding School, and they wanted to have the trainers who become masters, all right, and would come through this educational system, understand saddle fitting. And I found a massive difference when Professor Meiners, he taught at the university in Lüneburg, and he talked about the biomechanics of the rider and what exercises they need to do, exactly what you do. You know how I found the difference? That the saddle fitting was less frequent because the rider becomes more balanced. But the number one step, and I like to say it from the bottom up, the first we need to recognize, what am I dealing with? I'm dealing with a quadruped, an animal that runs on four legs, but sometimes gets ridden way beyond the finishing of the skeleton. The musculature, the ligaments, holds this whole thing together. Now, if I'm putting weight on it, if it's a Western saddle, futurity at 2 years old, racing, 2 years old racing, by the time the hunter jumper, pleasure rider, event rider buys thoroughbreds off the track, they're deformed, full stop. Why are they deformed? Because they're only riding one direction. Imagine I take lessons from you and you give me exercises only on the right side. See how you laugh? It's crazy, right? So we're dealing with animals who do all kinds of sports only to see the deformity in the skeletal. Unless I fit the saddle to the skeletal of the horse. Muscle change, but the bone structure, what is developed, the upper arm is not finished until 3. But if I start riding at 2, I influence it. Okay. So if the horse has transitional vertebrae, there is no training in the world. That's why I use the analogy of the picnic table. So I can have my picnic table on the flat ground, but if I like to choose to have my picnic on a little hill, I got to adjust the legs. Otherwise, the soup slides down. So I find it fascinating how when the horse is fitted correctly and the saddle is adapted to the evenness or unevenness of the horse, here comes the kicker. It makes no difference if the rider does not do his part. Be even. And like you said it so eloquently and so nicely, you know, we all have weaknesses. We all have issues. If it's through sitting at the office, driving cars, right-handed, left-handed, irrelevant. If I expect an athlete to perform, which is the horse, then I have to look inside and say, I'm an athlete too. I have a responsibility. So what is it? Do I get injections? Do I pay a lot of saddle fitting? Or do I take 5 minutes of my time and do what you suggest? How do you find you overcome the naysayers, Aoife, in your industry? How do you get people to get the 5 minutes? Because we always have no time. We always run.
No one has time, and I think it's getting even worse as we go along. But I like to find and ask people the question of, if you do nothing now, does it get better on its own? Does it magically change? Does it adjust? Do you feel better, or does the same performance diminish at the same rate going downward? My job is to make sure that we can catch it at one level and stabilize, and then go up from there. And the stability aspect of that goes back into, one, the pillars, but two, the aspect of making sure that something doesn't continue to decrease. And if we can do that, then I know for a fact that we can make that progress. And I've done it hundreds of times. But most importantly is getting people to understand that it doesn't have to be 2 hours. It doesn't have to be at a gym. It doesn't have to be any of those things. And my big goal is to continue to make sure that people see barns, yards, whatever words that you call them, places where horses live, as a physical training place for us as well. And so while we don't need barbells and major heavy equipment for the average person, it could be just bands, and it could be a small set of dumbbells, which we now have in 2024 adjustable. So they can take up this much space in your barn, and bands obviously take up 0 space theoretically. So in that case, knowing what to do, and then using that time and making that time a priority for not only yourself, but for your horse. Because as I just got off of a coaching call just beforehand, but most importantly, what she was saying is, I feel the difference, I've seen the difference, and I wouldn't go back at all, knowing where I've been and what I'm feeling now as we continue to go forward. So helping and building her posture and enhancing that has made such a difference for her. And I know it's done that for so many others in that same case. But the naysayers are the people who may not want to put in the work right now. They may not be there, and that's okay. We're speaking to them, and prayerfully through our series here, this would help them to say, you know what, I can do that. You know what, they are speaking something that intrinsically ignites something that says, I do want to do better for my horse, and here's how I can do it. So for me, the 5, the 10, the 15 minutes is technically most of my workouts for training programs for my clients are 30, but believe it or not, we're now seeing even more that we're having to do half of that workout over more days through the week to get them to feel like cognitively and physically they're capable of doing that within their busy schedules.
I always compare it to people who go to the veterinarian or to the doctor. They go there when they have pain.
Yep.
They come to you when nothing else works. They come to me, buy a saddle or fit a saddle when nothing works. We're doing this episode, so 6-part series, because our goal is a little different. Our goal is to really make a difference for the animal, for the horse. I know you're a passionate horse lover, and you love to teach and you love to give. So also, what if we convince people, check your saddle fit before it's too late, before you need a new saddle. Work on your body before you have long-term damage, because this is what this episode is about. Once the cartilage is damaged on the horse or in the rider's body, there's only so much left in our wonder box. So I hope this presentation ignited some people and think about it, because we all know we all hate changes. Little babies who have poopy diapers, they love changes, but people hate changes. So how am I going to put now 5 minutes exercise, or how do I now put my head around that my off-the-track thoroughbred may need a saddle, like I need to adjust the tables on the hill to get my balance in the first place? I think it's through education, right, Aoife? And you and I are so passionate, and we giving our time for free to you people who maybe say, maybe I want to learn a little bit more about Aoife. Maybe I'm looking into these guys here who really want to do something for the horse. And, you know, I always say I never want to sell a person a saddle. I want them to sell 25 saddles. And then people say, are you nuts? I don't have money for 25 saddles. No, but if you learn one thing, what made the life difference to the horse, you do this. Word of mouth advertising. And then you bring customer. Same with you. When you have a customer who is so happy, they tell their friends. And you have another customer, correct?
I have seen that multiple years. Absolutely.
So we only grow our business and we only grow our passion to help the animals and the humans if people recommend us. So if you like what you heard today, recommend us. If you don't tell anybody. But I'm sure you will like what you just heard. And I can't wait to do the episode number 2 with you, Aoife. And thank you for taking your time. I know you're in England right now. It's sort of getting to the end of the day.
Yes, it is.
A little bit left. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and watching.
Okay, bye.
Bye.